Have you ever imagined walking into a bank just to check a balance, and walking out humiliated, accused, and expelled? That's exactly what happened when a black girl only 10 years old, wearing worn-out shoes and holding an envelope too old to draw attention, decided to do something simple: check her own account. The manager laughed. The customers agreed. Security was called. Everything suggested that girl would learn, in the cruelest way possible, that certain places are not for her. But what no one there knew was that laughter was about to cost careers, reputations, and expose a level of structural prejudice that could no longer be hidden. Because when the balance finally appeared on the screen, the silence was deafening. And the entire bank realized it had made a mistake that could not be erased. This is not just a story about money. It's about dignity, racism, and the exact moment when power changes hands. Stay until the end because the twist goes far beyond what you imagine. And if you want to see more stories like this, stories that reveal truths many prefer to hide, subscribe to the channel now. Anna pushed the bank's glass door open with her small hands, feeling the weight of the place before even taking her first step inside. The air was too cold, too clean, too quiet for someone like her. Her worn-out shoes squeaked softly against the marble floor, exposing every movement. She took a deep breath, just as her grandmother had taught her, and straightened her shoulders. She wasn't there to ask for anything. She was there simply to check something that belonged to her. Even so, every stare seemed to pierce her skin before anyone said a single word. Anna moved forward, her heart pounding louder than the hum of the air conditioning. Still she kept walking. She was only 10 years old, but she had learned early not to lower her head. The soles of her shoes were cracked, the sides split open like tired mouths worn down by the road. The jacket passed down from a bigger cousin swallowed her thin arms. Nothing about her fit that place of white walls, polished columns, and perfumed people. But the envelope pressed tightly against her chest gave her courage. Inside it were answers, promises, and the last wish of someone who believed in her. Anna mentally rehearsed the simple words she would say at the counter. She didn't want to make a mistake. She didn't want to draw attention. She just wanted to leave there whole. The counter seemed too tall when she stopped in front of it. Anna stretched her body, resting her fingertips on the cold edge. On the other side, a teller typed without looking up. The keyboard made enough noise to fill the uncomfortable silence. Anna swallowed hard and waited to be noticed. Every second stretched like a rubber band about to snap. People passed behind her, some slowed their pace, others pretended not to see. She felt her face grow warm, but she stayed there. She knew that if she stepped back now, she might not have the courage to return. When she was finally noticed, Anna spoke softly but firmly. She asked to check the account balance. No extra words, no explanation. Just that. As she spoke, she gripped the envelope tighter, as if it might slip away and disappear. Her eyes searched the teller's face, trying to find neutrality. The request was simple, almost ordinary. Even so, something in the room changed. The air felt heavier. As if that sentence should not exist there, coming from someone like her. She didn't realize it right away, but some of the conversations around her dropped in volume. A well-dressed couple stopped talking. A man in a dark suit looked up from his phone. Her presence had created an invisible disturbance in the perfect environment. Anna felt it in her body before understanding it with her mind. Still she remained still. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't falter. Her manners were the same ones she had learned at home. She wasn't invading anything. She was simply exercising a right whose weight she did not yet understand. The manager, who had been busy at another desk, looked up at that moment. His gaze ran over Anna from top to bottom, too quickly to be discreet. Details she never thought about were assessed in seconds. The condition of her clothes. The color of her skin. The size of her body. Anna felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't fear. It was something older, something she had felt before in other places. A silent warning that something was about to change. Even so, Anna held his gaze when he approached. Not out of defiance but out of necessity. She had learned that looking away only gave others permission to decide for you. She breathed again, thinking of her grandmother. Stand firm, echoed inside her. The request had already been made. Now all that remained was to wait for the answer. There were no laughs yet. No harsh words yet. Just that suspended, heavy moment where everything could continue normally, or collapse. She didn't know it, but that simple request had broken an invisible rule of the place. Something that was never written down but always practiced. People like her didn't come in alone. They didn't ask about money. They didn't talk about balances. Anna had no awareness of this. To her, the bank was just a building. But to those around her, that moment was already being seen as a mistake. A mistake someone would hurry to correct. And that correction was about to begin. The silence stretched longer than it should have. The teller hesitated. The manager stopped directly in front of Anna. His face showed no doubt, only decision. Something was being chosen there, and it was not the easiest path. Anna felt her stomach tighten, but she didn't step back. She still believed she would be treated like anyone else. She didn't yet know that the counter was about to become a stage. And that from that moment on, everything would spiral out of control in a way no one in the lobby expected. Francisco Souza did not respond right away. He tilted his head slightly as if trying to confirm whether he had heard correctly, and a crooked smile began to form at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a discreet smile. It was wide, loud, exaggerated. Within seconds, laughter burst out, far too loud for that controlled environment. The sound echoed through the lobby and shattered the silence that had weighed heavily before. Some people turned their heads automatically. Others smiled by reflex. Anna felt the impact before she even understood why. The laughter wasn't for the situation. It was for her. Francisco rested one hand on the counter, still laughing as if he had just heard the joke of the day. He repeated the girl's request out loud, his tone dripping with irony. "Check the balance?" he said, dragging out the words. The volume was enough to reach even those farther away. The bank, which had seemed large before, now felt far too small. Anna felt her eyes burn, but she remained still. Her expression didn't change. Inside, something tightened, but it didn't break. She hadn't done anything wrong. The manager kept talking, now turning the situation into a spectacle. He commented on the place they were in, on the type of client the bank served. Each sentence came with short laughs, carefully calculated to provoke a reaction. Some people laughed along. Others simply watched as if witnessing something ordinary. Anna realized it wasn't just about money. It was about putting her on display, diminishing her, exposing her. Francisco wasn't speaking to her. He was speaking about her as if she were an object out of place. He made a broad gesture with his arm, subtly pointing at her shoes, then at her clothes. He didn't need to say much. The subtext was clear. His tone was light, almost playful, but it carried something heavy beneath it. A kind of contempt that doesn't shout but cuts deeper. Anna felt the heat rise to her face. Her heart raced, but no words came out. Not because she didn't want to respond, but because she understood that any word would be used against her on that improvised stage. The manager's laughter began to infect the room. A man nearby let out a short chuckle. A woman whispered something into her husband's ear. The sound of typing, once constant, had stopped. Everyone was watching. Francisco noticed this and enjoyed it. He straightened his posture, taking center stage. It was the kind of attention he knew well. The more eyes on him, the more secure he felt. And Anna, standing there, had become the perfect reason. He asked a rhetorical question, looking around as if seeking silent agreement. "Has this turned into a joke now?" he said, still smiling. Some heads nodded. Others remained neutral. Anna felt the floor grow colder beneath her feet. The simple request she had made minutes earlier now felt forbidden. She couldn't understand how everything had changed so fast. The envelope pressed to her chest seemed heavier. Still she didn't move. Francisco leaned in a little closer, bringing his face nearer to hers. The smile faded slightly but didn't disappear. Now it was sharper. He spoke in a tone that mixed mockery and false politeness, like someone teaching a lesson. He said that kind of request wasn't common. That there were procedures. That this wasn't a place for jokes. Every word was chosen to sound reasonable but carried judgment. Anna listened in silence, feeling something inside her crack, very slowly. She tried to say something but the manager gave her no space. He kept talking, controlling the rhythm of the scene. The goal wasn't to resolve anything. It was to establish who was in charge. Anna realized this when he looked around again, searching for the audience's reaction. The entire bank seemed to go along with the moment. Even those who didn't smile didn't intervene. The lack of defense hurt almost as much as the words. The laughter finally stopped, replaced by a silence thick with expectation. Francisco took a deep breath as if he were about to end the matter, but he didn't. Something in his gaze suggested that this was far from over. Anna felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The atmosphere had changed for good. What had started as a simple request was now something bigger. Something slipping out of her control. And the feeling was that the next step would be even worse. The manager's laughter opened the door to something even more cruel. It wasn't an immediate explosion, but a slow drip of comments, looks, and gestures that began to spread through the lobby. A well-dressed woman murmured that this was no place for people like that. A man adjusted his jacket and nodded in agreement as if defending an old rule. The words weren't spoken directly to Anna, but they all targeted her. It was as if the entire bank had decided she needed to understand where she was standing. Francisco sensed the silent support and felt authorized to go further. His tone changed. It was no longer just mockery. It was certainty. He commented that the bank served real clients, people who understood the value of time and money. His gaze passed over Anna as if she weren't a whole person, just a problem to be removed. Anna felt her chest tighten. For the first time she wanted to run out. But something stronger kept her there. The feeling that stepping back would mean accepting all of that as truth. The employees behind the counter didn't react. Some pretended to organize papers. Others watched in silence. No one stepped forward. No one intervened. Their indifference was almost deafening. Anna realized she wasn't facing just one person, but an entire system that worked that way. Prejudice didn't need to shout when everyone silently agreed. Every second she stood there reinforced that bitter certainty. An older customer made a cutting remark, saying that this kind of child always showed up wanting something that wasn't theirs. The sentence hung in the air like a verdict. Some laughed. Others nodded discreetly. Anna felt her eyes burn again, but she blinked quickly. She didn't want to cry there. She didn't want to give them that satisfaction. She pressed the envelope tighter against her chest, as if her grandmother's letter could protect her from that invisible attack coming from all sides. Francisco crossed his arms and let the comments continue. He didn't interrupt anyone. On the contrary, he seemed pleased. It reinforced his position. He no longer had to be the villain alone. The audience was doing the work for him. Anna understood in that moment that racism didn't come only from offensive words, but from the silent union of those who chose not to oppose it. The bank had turned into a chorus against her. She tried to explain, to say she just wanted to check the balance, but her voice was lost in the room. No one was interested in listening. People had already decided who she was before she even opened her mouth. Anna felt a mix of confusion and anger. How could something so simple be turned into an accusation? How could such a small request generate so much hatred disguised as normality? An employee whispered something to another, looking directly at Anna. The gesture was quick, but enough for the girl to notice. That hurt more than any word spoken out loud. The feeling of being observed as a walking mistake intensified. She no longer knew where to rest her eyes. Every corner of the bank felt hostile. Every face seemed to carry judgment. Francisco finally spoke again, now with a harsher tone. He said that this kind of situation disrupted the bank's operations. That there were rules. That not everyone could simply walk in and demand service. The use of the words "not everyone" was calculated. Anna understood the message. This wasn't about organization. It was about exclusion. And everyone there seemed to agree. The silence that followed was heavy. No one defended the girl. No one questioned the manager. The entire bank seemed to accept that version of events. Anna felt a knot tighten in her throat. Still she didn't move. Something inside her told her that leaving at that moment would mean giving up something important. And without realizing it, she was about to be pushed to an even more dangerous limit, where prejudice would stop being just words and become action. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone who wasn't paying close attention. Francisco merely tilted his body slightly to the side and made a short gesture with his hand, as if calling someone without needing to speak. The security guard, who had been observing everything from a distance until then, understood immediately. He straightened his posture and began walking toward the counter. The sound of his footsteps echoed across the marble floor, setting a different rhythm in the room. Anna sensed it before she even looked. There was something in the air that signaled danger. The man was large, dressed in a dark uniform, his expression too neutral to be reassuring. He wasn't running, showed no sense of urgency. That made everything worse. Each step seemed to confirm that the situation had moved from embarrassment to a real threat. Anna felt her stomach tighten. It was no longer just humiliation. Now there was the very real possibility of being expelled, touched, pushed. Even so, she didn't back away. She stood still, as if her body had decided to resist on its own. Francisco made room for the security guard, as if handing over control of the scene. His tone changed again. Now it was formal, cold, filled with authority. He said the situation was getting out of control. That the bank couldn't allow disturbances. The word disturbances landed heavily, because Anna hadn't done anything beyond simply existing there. Still, it was on her that all eyes were fixed. As if it were obvious who the problem was. The security guard stopped a few steps away from the girl. He didn't touch her, but his presence alone was intimidating. He clasped his hands in front of his body, waiting for orders. Anna slowly lifted her gaze. For the first time she felt real fear. Not the loud kind but the quiet kind that freezes you. She thought of her grandmother, the envelope, everything she had walked through to get there. She also thought about how no one would do anything if something went wrong. That was the most frightening part. A customer whispered that this had already gone too far. Another said it would be better to take the girl out before she caused more problems. The words "take" and "problems" echoed in Anna's mind. She realized that, to them, the solution was simple. Remove. Erase. Pretend nothing had happened. The bank seemed to agree. The complicit silence once again took over the room. Francisco stepped a little closer and spoke directly to the security guard without looking at Anna. He said it was better to be cautious. That this kind of situation needed to be resolved quickly. The guard nodded. There was no discussion. No questioning. Everything was treated as standard procedure. Anna felt a knot form in her throat. It was as if she were being pushed out of a place she had never been allowed to enter. She tried to speak, to explain that she had documents, that there was an account, that she wasn't there by mistake. Her voice came out low, almost swallowed by the room. No one responded. Francisco pretended not to hear. The security guard remained still, waiting for the next command. A feeling of invisibility washed over her. She was there, but no one saw her as someone worthy of being heard. Anna's heart was beating so hard it seemed to echo in her ears. She realized this was the last chance before being forcibly removed. Her entire body was tense, braced for something she didn't know exactly what it would be. The bank, which had once seemed merely cold and distant, now felt hostile. A place where she was clearly not welcome. Francisco took a deep breath, as if preparing to bring the situation to an end. His look was that of someone who believed he was right. The security guard subtly adjusted his stance. Anna squeezed the envelope tightly, feeling the paper crumple beneath her fingers. Something needed to happen. If not now, it would be too late. And in that tension-filled instant, she realized that the only thing that still hadn't been seen was precisely what could change everything. When the security guard took half a step forward, Anna reacted on instinct. It wasn't a scream or a desperate plea. It was a simple gesture. She raised the crumpled envelope that had been pressed against her chest from the beginning. The paper was already worn along the edges, folded and unfolded many times. It didn't look important to anyone there, but to her it was everything. Anna extended the envelope carefully, as if handing over something too fragile to fall to the floor. Her voice came out low but steady. She said she had documents. She said the account existed. She said her grandmother had left everything organized before she died. The word grandmother almost went unnoticed in the room, but to Anna it sounded like a shield. It was the memory of someone who believed in her, even when the whole world seemed to say otherwise. She kept her arm extended, even without knowing if anyone would accept the envelope. Francisco looked at the paper with impatience. The smile was gone. In its place was irritation. He sighed as if this were just another attempt to delay the inevitable. Even so, he gestured for the security guard to wait. He extended 2 fingers and took the envelope without any delicacy. The contact was quick, almost rough. To him it was just paper. To Anna, it was an extension of her own story. The manager opened the envelope right there without care, pulling the documents out one by one. Simple papers but neatly organized. There was a carefully folded letter, handwritten. Anna's name appeared more than once. Francisco skimmed it quickly, impatiently, like someone searching for a mistake. With each line, his expression hardened a little more. Something didn't match the image he had formed just moments earlier. Anna watched everything in silence. Her heart was racing, now mixed with a hint of hope. That was the proof her grandmother had promised. The plan that had been repeated so many times at the kitchen table, spoken in a calm, caring voice. If they ever treat you badly, you show this, her grandmother used to say. Anna had never imagined that day would come so soon, or that it would be like this. Francisco frowned when he came across information he hadn't expected. He reread one section, then another. He didn't say anything. He just went through the papers again more slowly. Some people in the lobby noticed the change and grew curious. The murmuring faded. For the first time since Anna had walked in, the room was not completely against her. There was doubt. And that alone was something new. Even so, the manager didn't hand the documents back. He didn't apologize. He didn't soften his tone. On the contrary, he closed the envelope and held it firmly as if it now belonged to him. The look he gave Anna was hard. There was something there he didn't want to admit. A discomfort that didn't fit the confident posture he had worn minutes before. But instead of backing down, he was preparing for something else. Anna sensed it before he spoke. The atmosphere had changed, but not in the way she expected. The manager didn't seem willing to acknowledge a mistake. He seemed willing to double down. The presence of the envelope, instead of ending the conflict, had created a new kind of tension. A more dangerous tension because now there was something concrete at stake. The security guard watched in silence, alert. The customers did too. Everyone waited for Francisco's reaction. He took a deep breath, tightened his grip on the envelope and lifted his gaze. The decision had been made. Anna felt a chill run down her spine. She had shown the proof. But she still didn't know if it would be enough. And the manager's next move would make it clear just how far he was willing to go. Francisco opened the envelope again, this time with more care than before, as if he feared that someone might notice what he himself was beginning to see. Among the simple papers, something rigid slipped out and fell onto the counter with a dull sound. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. A dark, heavy card, with metallic details that didn't match the image everyone had formed of the girl standing in front of them. Anna recognized it instantly. Her grandmother had shown her that card only once, saying it should be used only as a last resort. The manager froze for a second. It wasn't a visible shock, but a strange pause, almost imperceptible. His eyes locked onto the card, and the smile that had never returned stayed absent. The words "Platinum Reserve" reflected the lobby lights in a way that was impossible to ignore. Some of the people nearby subtly leaned forward to get a better look. The murmur returned, now charged with curiosity. Something there didn't make sense and everyone could feel it. Francisco picked up the card between his fingers as if testing its weight. He turned it slightly, confirming the engraved name. Silence spread again, thicker than before. For a moment, it seemed he might reconsider everything. That maybe he would apologize. That maybe he would return the documents and end the situation. Anna felt her heart race at the possibility. But the hesitation lasted far too briefly to become change. The manager's gaze hardened. Instead of admitting the mistake, he straightened his posture and lifted his chin. The presence of that card didn't dismantle his prejudice. It only challenged it. And Francisco chose not to back down. He said in a firm tone that it proved nothing. That cards could be stolen. That documents could be forged. Each sentence was delivered as if it were obvious, as if he were doing the bank a favor by being suspicious. Anna felt the shock ripple through her body. That was the strongest proof there was. And still it wasn't enough. The card, which should have opened doors, now seemed to turn into a weapon against her. Francisco held the object the way one holds something dangerous, keeping it at a distance as if Anna herself could contaminate it. Some people in the lobby exchanged confused looks. Others nodded, comfortable with believing a version that didn't require rethinking anything. The manager spoke about responsibility, about security, about scams becoming more and more common. He used technical words chosen to sound professional. But the tone was the same as before. Cold. Judgmental. Anna realized that, for him, admitting he was wrong would mean losing something greater than control of the situation. It would mean admitting he had judged someone by appearance. And that was unacceptable to someone who had always been certain he was on the right side. The card remained on the counter, gleaming under the artificial lights, creating a cruel contrast. For any other customer, it would have been a symbol of immediate respect. For Anna, it became a reason for suspicion. The silence of the people around didn't help. No one questioned the manager. No one said that it didn't make sense. The proof was right there, visible, but the truth continued to be ignored. Francisco took a deep breath once more and made a silent decision. The way he held the card changed. It was no longer analysis. It was an accusation about to be announced. Anna felt a tightness in her chest. She had shown everything she could. Still, it seemed the bottom had not been reached. And in that moment, it became clear that the next step would not be retreat, it would be an attack. Francisco raised the card into the air, holding it between his fingers as if presenting definitive evidence. The gesture was calculated to draw attention. The metallic shine reflected the lobby lights and immediately attracted curious looks. He was no longer speaking only to Anna. He was speaking to everyone. His voice took on a louder, firmer tone, loaded with false authority. He said it needed to be investigated. He said that card could not be in her possession. The word theft wasn't spoken right away, but it was present in every syllable. Francisco explained in a voice far too loud that scams happened all the time. That children were used as bait. That cards like that didn't just appear out of nowhere. Each sentence sounded rehearsed, ready to justify what was coming next. Anna felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. This was no longer just humiliation. It was a serious accusation, thrown out in front of strangers who were already prepared to believe it. Some people in the lobby reacted immediately. A woman clutched her purse. A man crossed his arms, watching Anna with open suspicion. The atmosphere shifted from curiosity to vigilance. Francisco noticed and stepped forward again. He raised the card even higher and said he needed to protect the bank's clients. He cast himself as the hero of a situation he himself had created. Anna tried to speak, to explain that the card belonged to her grandmother, that everything was written in the letter. Her voice trembled for the first time. Not from guilt but from shock. Francisco cut her off effortlessly. He said the story didn't make sense. He asked where she had gotten it. The question wasn't seeking an answer. It was seeking confirmation of the prejudice he had already chosen. The security guard moved a little closer. He still didn't touch her, but now he was too close. His presence reinforced the accusation without a single word. Anna felt her entire body go cold. The feeling of being cornered took over. Everything she did seemed wrong. Everything she said was seen as a lie. The entire bank seemed to agree that she was guilty until proven otherwise. Francisco lightly shook the card in the air like someone displaying a trophy. He said it was enough evidence to activate protocols. The word protocols sounded heavy, final. Anna didn't know exactly what it meant, but she knew nothing good followed it. Her eyes began to burn, but she fought to keep the tears away. She didn't want to cry there. She didn't want to give him that victory. The manager kept talking about responsibility, about how the bank couldn't be deceived. Each sentence added another layer of humiliation. Anna realized that, in that moment, what was true no longer mattered. What mattered was what felt most comfortable for everyone there. And the version where she was guilty required fewer questions. The silence of the people around was heavy. No one defended her. No one examined the documents carefully. The card was still held high, a distorted symbol. Anna felt a strange pain in her chest, a mix of fear and indignation. She had walked in believing she would be treated like anyone else. Now she was being treated as a threat. Francisco slowly lowered the card and pointed toward a corner of the bank, away from the main counter. The gesture was sharp, impersonal. The accusation had already been made. The judgment had already happened. And Anna understood in that instant that the worst was still to come. Because when someone decides you are guilty, the next step is never to listen, it is to isolate. Francisco didn't need to raise his voice to give the order. He simply tilted his chin, pointing toward a forgotten space in the bank, far from the main counter and distant from the important clients. It was a cramped, poorly lit corner, near the janitor's closet and the hallway that led to the restrooms. The kind of place no one chooses to stand in. The kind of place reserved for those who need to be hidden. Anna understood the message immediately, even without words. The security guard stepped closer and made a short gesture with his hand, indicating the way. There was no touch, but the message was clear. Anna began to walk slowly, feeling each step way heavier than the last. The sound of her worn shoes echoed softly in that forgotten section of the bank. Some people watched the scene with disguised curiosity. Others looked away, relieved it wasn't them in that place. The punishment wasn't physical, but it ran deep. The space Anna was taken to smelled of cheap cleaning product. The wall bore old marks, stains no one had bothered to remove. There was no comfortable chair, only a narrow, cold bench. The contrast with the rest of the bank was brutal. There was no polished marble or decorative plants there. It was as if that corner existed to remind people who didn't fit the standard. Anna sat down without complaint, trying to maintain the posture her grandmother had always demanded of her. Francisco remained at a distance, watching. He explained out loud that this was only a temporary measure. He said he needed to sort the situation out. But his tone carried satisfaction. He knew exactly what he was doing. Isolation was part of the punishment. Exposing without touching. Humiliating without getting his hands dirty. Anna felt her face burn again, not from shame but from silent indignation. Meanwhile, the bank continued to function normally. People were served, conversations went on, laughter rose in other corners. The world hadn't stopped because of her. That hurt more than any word. Anna realized she could disappear there without anyone caring. The envelope now rested on her lap, even more crumpled. Her grandmother's letter seemed to pulse against her chest, as if reminding her she still wasn't alone. Some customers passed nearby and cast quick, curious, judgmental glances. A woman whispered that this was what happened when someone tried to overstep their place. Anna heard it. Pretended she didn't. With each comment, she closed herself off a little more inside, building a silent armor. She wouldn't cry there. She wouldn't give that spectacle to anyone. The security guard returned to his original position, far from her. The surveillance, however, remained invisible. Anna knew that any movement would be watched. Any attempt to leave that corner would be interpreted as guilt. The punishment was complete. She was separated, isolated, reduced to a problem to be dealt with later. The bank had moved on without her. Sitting there, Anna felt time stretch. Each second felt like a test of endurance. Her heart was still beating fast, now accompanied by a bitter sense of abandonment. Even so, something inside her remained firm. She remembered her grandmother saying that the truth doesn't need to shout. It simply waits. And Anna, in that forgotten corner, was about to hold on to exactly that. She didn't know how long she would stay there. She didn't know what would happen next. But she knew that this silent punishment had been designed to break her. And while the bank pretended she didn't exist, something began to take shape inside her. A quiet strength, fed by memory, that would find support where no one expected it. Alone in that forgotten corner, Anna carefully pulled the letter out of the envelope, as if afraid the paper might fall apart between her fingers. The edges were worn, the fold marked from being opened and closed so many times. The handwriting was firm yet gentle, recognizable at a glance. Just seeing those letters eased the tightness in her chest a little. It was as if her grandmother were there, sitting beside her, holding her hand in silence. Anna began to read in a low voice, almost soundless, merely moving her lips. Each sentence felt as though it had been written for that exact moment, even though it had been written long before any of this happened. Her grandmother spoke of dignity, of patience, of not letting anyone decide who Anna was. She spoke of how the world would not always be fair, but that the truth had its own way of emerging. Anna felt her eyes fill, not with sadness but with recognition. That letter was a refuge. As she read, the noise of the bank seemed distant. The conversations, footsteps, and muffled laughter faded into an almost non-existent background. Her entire focus was on the words. Her grandmother mentioned the future, said she had prepared everything carefully, that Anna would never be left helpless. There were simple instructions, written with affection, like guidance meant for an entire lifetime, not just one specific situation. Anna took a deep breath, feeling her heart slow down. Across the lobby, Francisco watched from a distance. He pretended to review paperwork, but his gaze returned again and again to the girl sitting in the corner. Something about that unexpected calm unsettled him. He had expected tears, desperation, pleading. Instead, he saw a quiet child, focused as if she had found strength where none should exist. It made him uncomfortable, though he would never admit it. Anna reread a passage of the letter more slowly. Her grandmother spoke about waiting for the right moment, about not reacting with anger when that was exactly what the other person wanted. The words seemed to gain weight in that hostile environment. It was as if the letter were holding Anna in place, keeping her from breaking inside. The entire bank could ignore her, but those lines recognized her completely. A tear slid down, silent, without a sob. Anna didn't wipe it away right away. She let it fall onto the paper, marking the letter as a living part of that moment. It wasn't weakness. It was connection. She folded the paper carefully, as one does with something too precious to leave exposed. The envelope returned to her lap, now not only as proof but as a shield. When Francisco noticed the tear, he seemed to relax for a moment. He interpreted it as a sign that the pressure was working. He didn't hear the letter. He didn't know those words. He didn't realize that while he believed he was winning, he was only postponing something greater. His mistake was underestimating the power of what cannot be seen. Anna slowly lifted her gaze and observed the movement of the bank once more. The anxiety was still there, but now it was accompanied by a strange serenity. She didn't know how long she would have to wait. She didn't know if anyone would come to her defense. But she knew she wasn't wrong. And that certainty was enough to keep her there, steady, while the clock seemed to move forward cruelly, as if testing her endurance to its limit. The clock on the wall showed a time Anna had seen many times before, but now it seemed not to move forward. The hands advanced too slowly, almost as a provocation. Francisco approached the corner where she was sitting, keeping a calculated distance. He looked at the clock, then at her, and said he would need another 15 minutes. His tone was bureaucratic, as if he were granting a favor. To Anna those words sounded like a sentence. She nodded in silence. There was no alternative. 15 minutes could be nothing for someone who was comfortable, but for someone waiting in isolation they were far too long. Anna felt the weight of time settle on her shoulders. The bank continued to operate, people coming and going, while she remained trapped in that undefined interval. Every second felt like a test of patience she had never asked to take. The simple phone she carried in her pocket vibrated from time to time. Short messages from her uncle Roberto Silva appeared on the cracked screen. He said he was on his way. Then that he had been delayed. Then that it would be just a few more minutes. Anna read each message carefully, feeling hope grow and shrink at the same time. The fractured glass reflected her own face, far too tired for someone so young. Francisco watched from a distance, pretending not to care. To him the delay was useful. The longer Anna stayed there, the weaker she seemed. He believed that. Waiting was part of the strategy. There was no need to shout or expel her right then. It was enough to let time do the work. Anna felt that in her body. Anxiety came in waves, tightening her chest, releasing it, then returning again. The minutes passed slowly. Anna shifted her gaze between the clock and the phone. Each new vibration brought relief and frustration at the same time. She wondered if her uncle would really arrive. She wondered if he had understood everything correctly. She wondered if, in the end, she would be left alone. The bank felt far too large when you were waiting for someone who didn't arrive. Francisco spoke again, saying he still needed to confirm some information. The tone was the same. "Another 15 minutes, he repeated as if it were simple. Anna felt her throat tighten. She didn't respond. She just held the envelope more tightly. Her grandmother's letter seemed to grow heavier with each new delay, as if it too were waiting. The security guard cast a quick glance in her direction, then looked away. There was something like discomfort there, but he didn't move. The system continued to function as it always had. Anna felt exhaustion seep in. Not physical but emotional. Waiting hurts in a silent way. She understood that now. When the phone vibrated again, Anna took a deep breath before looking. Another message from Roberto Silva. He said he was arriving but had been stopped along the way. The words always seemed to promise the end of the wait, but never delivered it. Anna closed her eyes for a moment. She didn't cry. She just felt. Time kept passing, cruel, indifferent. And in that bank, waiting had become yet another form of punishment. While Anna remained seated in the forgotten corner, the bank continued its normal rhythm, almost too cheerful for that moment. The glass door opened and a well-dressed white man walked in, talking on the phone. He didn't seem rushed, but he was received as if he were expected. An immediate smile appeared on the teller's face. The atmosphere around him was light, comfortable. Anna noticed it even from a distance. The man approached the counter and was attended to right away, without having to explain anything. His name was spoken out loud, with respect. They offered him water, asked if he was okay, if he needed anything else. Everything happened far too quickly. Anna felt a tightness in her chest. It wasn't just about time. It was about priority. She had been there much longer, yet remained invisible. Francisco followed the scene closely, now using the other customer service as silent proof that the bank was functioning perfectly. He smiled slightly, satisfied. To anyone watching from the outside, it seemed like there was no problem at all. Just a child waiting in the corner, as if that were natural. Anna noticed the contrast and felt the injustice deepen inside her. The man laughed at something the teller said. He signed a few papers, received detailed explanations. All calmly, without tension. Anna watched in silence, feeling her heart beat faster. Every polite gesture he received was a cruel reminder of the treatment she hadn't been given. The bank had two realities operating at the same time. Other customers arrived and were also served quickly. They all looked the same in the eyes of the bank. Anna began to notice the pattern. It wasn't coincidence. It was a rule. The feeling of being pushed aside mixed with indignation. She thought of her grandmother, of how none of this would have happened if she were there. She also thought about how no one seemed to notice the absurdity of the situation. Francisco passed near her again without looking. He commented about efficiency to another employee, as if proud of the environment he controlled. Anna felt the urge to scream, to call attention to the injustice. But she didn't. Something inside her told her that this contrast needed to be seen by someone with the courage to act. And that person hadn't arrived yet. The white man finished his business and left satisfied, thanking everyone. The glass door closed softly behind him. Anna watched for a few seconds. That exit seemed to symbolize everything she didn't have at that moment. Respect. Automatic credibility. Silence settled again around the corner where she was sitting. The clock marked a few more minutes. Anna kept waiting. No one came to speak to her. No one explained anything. The bank seemed comfortable ignoring her. The injustice no longer needed words. It was laid bare in every quick service, in every smile offered to those who didn't need to prove anything. She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. It wasn't just about her. It was about everything that represented. And while the bank continued serving those who had always been served, Anna remained there, accumulating something that wasn't visible, but that would soon carry enough weight to turn everything upside down. Lucian was leaning near the wall, watching the lobby with an attention that looked routine but wasn't. He had seen everything from the beginning. He saw the girl walk in. He saw the manager's laughter. He saw the accusation come out of nowhere. Now he saw Anna sitting in that forgotten corner, too small to carry so much alone. His hands slowly clenched and unclenched, as if his body wanted to act before his mind allowed it. Lucian knew that kind of situation. It wasn't the first time. The script always changed a little, but the ending almost never did. He knew what it was like to be ignored, to be judged, to be treated like a problem. That was why every look Anna received hurt him in a strange way, almost personally. Even so, he remained still. The uniform felt heavier than usual that day. He looked at Francisco and then at the other employees. None of them seemed uncomfortable enough to intervene. Everything was within what they called normal. Lucian knew that one word out of place could cost him his job. He thought about his own family, the bills, the difficulty of finding another job. Fear didn't make noise, but it was efficient. It kept him exactly where he was. Anna lifted her gaze for a moment and met his eyes. It wasn't an explicit request for help. It was just a quick look, curious, almost tired. That hit Lucian hard. He looked away right after, hating his own reaction. His silence began to feel like complicity, even though that wasn't what he felt inside. The bank kept operating. People walking by, services being carried out, everything as if nothing were wrong. Lucian felt a knot in his stomach. He knew that silence was also a choice. And that choice was being made there, minute after minute. The urge to say something grew, but it was always smothered by reality. He wasn't the manager. He had no power. At least that was what he kept telling himself. Francisco walked past him and commented on something trivial, as if that day were ordinary. Lucian nodded by reflex, feeling ashamed immediately afterward. The manager's indifference made everything even heavier. Anna remained seated, waiting, holding the envelope as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Lucian knew that image would stay with him for a long time. He thought about calling someone higher up. He thought about suggesting calm. He thought about asking them to listen to the girl more carefully. Each thought died before turning into action. Fear was faster. And the system was grateful for that. His silence reinforced the order of things even against his will. Lucian took a deep breath and adjusted his uniform belt, an automatic gesture that hid the internal conflict. He felt small even though he was physically large. That contradiction bothered him. He wanted to be someone different in that moment. He wanted to do the right thing. But he remained still, a prisoner of his own need to survive. Meanwhile, Anna kept waiting. Lucian knew time was passing and that something needed to happen. He felt that this story wouldn't end there, in that forgotten corner. But he also knew that if it depended on him, nothing would change. And that realization hurt more than any reprimand. Silence had a price. And someone was paying it at that moment. Francisco approached again with calculated steps, carrying a thin folder he didn't need to open to look important. He stopped in front of Anna and said he needed to speak with her privately. His tone was dry, far too professional for a 10-year-old child. Without waiting for a response, he pointed to a table set even farther from the main flow of the bank. It wasn't an invitation. It was an order disguised as procedure. Anna stood up slowly, feeling her legs slightly tremble. She walked to the indicated table under the watchful eyes of a few people who pretended not to be looking. The space was isolated enough not to disrupt the bank, yet visible enough to maintain exposure. Francisco sat down across from her, crossing his arms. The table felt far too large between them, creating a distance that wasn't only physical. He began asking quick questions without softening his tone. He asked for her full name, her age, where she lived. Each of Anna's answers was short and direct. She didn't understand why she had to say all of that again. Francisco wrote something on a notepad even when there was nothing to record. The gesture served more to intimidate than to document. Anna felt that any wrong word would be used against her. The manager asked about the account, about her grandmother, about the card. With each question, his gaze seemed to search for a flaw, a contradiction. Anna answered as best she could, recalling the kitchen conversations, the patiently repeated instructions. Even so, the feeling was of being tested constantly. This wasn't a conversation. It was an interrogation. Francisco leaned forward and asked why she was alone. The tone carried judgment. Anna explained that her uncle was on his way. The manager wrote something she couldn't see. Then he asked why her grandmother hadn't come personally before she died. The question was thrown out carelessly as if it were just another data point. Anna felt a sharp tightening in her chest, but kept her voice steady. He kept pressing, repeating questions in different ways, trying to confuse her. He asked if anyone had told her to come there. If anyone had promised her anything. If she knew exactly what she was doing. Each sentence carried the idea that Anna wasn't capable of understanding her own situation. She felt anger but didn't let it show. She knew that was what he expected. The bank around them continued its rhythm, but that table felt like a world apart. Time moved more slowly there. Anna felt exhaustion building, not in her body but in her mind. Francisco showed no hurry. On the contrary, he seemed comfortable in that role. He had control. And he made sure she knew it. Lucian watched from a distance, attentive. He recognized the tone, the method, the intention. This wasn't a search for truth. It was pressure. Even so, he remained still. Anna noticed the guard's gaze for a moment, but didn't seek help. Something in her had already understood that this confrontation had to be faced alone. At least for now. Francisco ended the interrogation by saying he still needed to verify a few things. His tone was final, as if he had extracted everything he wanted. Anna returned to the corner where she had been before, carrying a heavy sense of exposure. She felt she had been analyzed, measured, judged. And even without any proof against her, the game still seemed tilted toward the wrong side. As she sat down again, Anna realized that the isolation had a clear purpose: to break her, to make her doubt herself. But despite the exhaustion, something inside her remained intact. And that silent resistance was beginning to bother those who believed they had total control over the situation. Francisco didn't seem satisfied with what he had heard. When he spoke again, his tone was different, sharper, less patient. He tilted his head and asked where Anna's parents were, as if their absence alone were an accusation. The question came loaded with assumptions. Anna replied that her mother had died and that her father was not present. The sentence came out simply, without drama. Even so, the manager frowned, as if he had found exactly what he was looking for. He wrote something down on the notepad and continued. He asked who she lived with, whether the home was permanent, whether she attended school regularly. The question stopped being about the account and became about her life. Each detail was treated like a piece of a puzzle he was assembling to justify his narrative. Anna began to recognize the pattern. It wasn't curiosity. It was an attempt to discredit everything she said. Francisco commented, in a voice low enough to sound polite, that situations like this usually involved dysfunctional families. He said it while looking directly at her, measuring the impact of the words. Anna felt a tight knot in her stomach. Not because it was true, but because he was trying to turn pain into evidence against her. Her family's story, which had always been a space of affection and struggle, was now being used as a weapon. He asked about the neighborhood where Anna lived, about the people around her, hinting at dangers without naming them directly. He spoke of bad influences, of adults who used children for the wrong things. Each sentence was cast like bait. Anna understood that any answer could be twisted. So she responded only with what was necessary, calmly, even as indignation grew inside her. Francisco then mentioned drugs, not as a direct accusation, but as a distant possibility. He said he had seen many cases start that way. The word hung in the air, heavy, unjust. Anna felt her face burn. That crossed a line she hadn't even known existed. It was no longer about money. It was about character, about origin, about who she was in his eyes. She thought about interrupting him, about saying that none of it made sense. But something made her remain silent. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the certainty that he wasn't interested in listening. The manager spoke to reinforce his own worldview, not to understand hers. Every attack on her family's history was, in truth, an attempt to erase her grandmother, the care, the planning, everything that had been built with love. Lucian watched from a distance and felt the discomfort grow. He knew that those kinds of questions were not part of any official procedure. It was abuse disguised as investigation. Even so, he remained still. Once again, the bank seemed to agree with the silence. Anna was alone in that invisible confrontation. Francisco ended the sequence of questions with a dry comment, saying he needed to be sure what kind of situation he was dealing with. Anna returned to the narrow bench, feeling something close tight inside her chest. It wasn't shame. It was contained anger. Her family's story had been attacked without any right to defense. And in that moment, it became clear that the next step would no longer be subtle. Power was about to be exercised in public. Francisco stood up from the table with a slow movement, calculated to be noticed. He adjusted his jacket, took a deep breath, and walked a few steps toward the center of the lobby. He didn't need to raise his voice. It was enough to speak loudly enough to be heard. The bank, which had already been following everything with silent curiosity, paid attention again. Anna realized immediately. Something was about to be announced. And it would not be discreet. The manager began by saying he needed to warn the customers. He talked about fraud attempts, about people who took advantage of others' good faith. He didn't mention Anna by name at first, but his gaze gave her away. Little by little, his words became more direct. People like her, he said without hesitation. The phrase landed heavily in the room. Anna felt the impact like an invisible shove. Some customers nodded immediately. Others murmured comments of approval. The support, even if silent, gave Francisco more confidence. He subtly pointed toward the corner where Anna was sitting and stated that the bank did not tolerate that kind of attempt. The word attempt carried the full accusation. There was no investigation. There was no doubt. There was a public sentence. Anna felt her body stiffen. Her face grew hot, but she held her posture. She looked around and found only curious, judgmental, or indifferent gazes. No sign of empathy. The abuse was now collective. Francisco was no longer alone. He had turned the lobby into a courtroom, and the audience accepted the role without question. The manager went on, saying it was his duty to protect the bank's assets and reputation. He used complex, formal words to justify something deeply unjust. Each sentence reinforced the idea that Anna represented a risk, a threat, not a child, not a client, just a problem to be eliminated. Lucian felt his stomach churn. This had crossed every limit. His silence was beginning to weigh like guilt. Even so, he remained still. The system worked this way because people like him were trained not to interfere. Anna, sitting there, felt the injustice turn into something almost physical, pressing against her chest, making it hard to breathe. Francisco finished by saying that this action would serve as an example. The word example sounded far too cruel. Anna realized she was being used to reaffirm an invisible hierarchy. The bank needed to show who belonged in that space and who did not. And she had been chosen for that role. The silence that followed was heavy. Some customers returned to their activities, satisfied. Others kept watching, waiting for the outcome. Anna remained seated, the envelope pressed tightly against her chest. The abuse had been public, calculated, irreversible. And in that instant, she understood that the next stage would leave no more room for waiting. Power had already been displayed. Now it would be executed. Francisco didn't argue anymore. He didn't explain anything. He simply made a short gesture with his hand toward the door, as if closing an unpleasant matter. The security guard understood immediately. He approached Anna with firm steps, no longer disguising his intention. The movement drew attention once again. Some people stopped what they were doing. Others watched with the cold curiosity of those who would not be affected. Anna stood up slowly. Her body felt heavy, but her posture remained upright. She didn't ask to stay. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She simply held the envelope against her chest and took the first step. The security guard walked beside her, keeping the exact distance needed to apply pressure without touching. It was an escort without contact, an expulsion without a shove. The kind of thing that looks clean on the outside but hurts deeply on the inside. As she walked through the lobby, Anna felt eyes stick to her skin. Some full of disapproval. Others of curiosity. None of solidarity. Each step toward the door seemed to erase a little more of the possibility of justice in that place. The marble floor reflected her small, displaced image, as if she belonged to neither world. Neither the one inside nor the one outside. Francisco watched from a distance, arms crossed, a satisfied expression on his face. To him it was simply the end of a problem. A completed procedure. An inconvenience removed from view. Anna realized this as she passed by him. There was no regret in the manager's eyes. Only certainty. The certainty of someone who has never truly been questioned. The glass door opened with a sharp sound. The cold air from outside hit Anna's face like a shock. The bank was left behind in seconds. The security guard stopped at the entrance and turned back without saying a word, as if she had ceased to exist the moment she crossed that invisible line. The door closed again, sealing the decision. Anna stood still outside for a few seconds. Her heart was beating hard, out of rhythm. It wasn't just sadness. It was the feeling of being rejected by something bigger than a single person. The bank, authority, the system. Everything had said without words that she didn't belong there. And that hurt in a way that was hard to explain. She took a deep breath and walked a few steps along the sidewalk, trying to move away from the entrance. The envelope remained pressed firmly against her chest. Her grandmother's letter seemed to pulse inside it, as if reminding her that this story wasn't over yet. Anna felt the weight of the expulsion, but also something new rising beneath the pain. A silent, dense indignation that did not fade. Inside, the routine had already returned to normal. Outside, Anna was alone. The contrast was cruel. But as she walked slowly away, she didn't know that this moment, which felt like rock bottom, was only the doorway to something much bigger. And that the expulsion, meant to erase her presence, was about to trigger consequences no one inside had imagined. Anna took only a few steps along the sidewalk when she felt the pocket of her jacket grow heavy in a strange way. The phone slipped out slowly as if her own body were too tired to hold on to it. There was no time to react. The device hit the ground with a sharp crack, followed by the thin sound of glass breaking. The noise felt far too loud in that silent moment. Anna stopped immediately. She bent down and picked up the phone carefully as if she could still prevent the damage. The screen was cracked, an irregular web splitting the image into pieces. Her uncle Roberto Silva's last message was still there, fragmented by the fractures. "I'm arriving." The words now felt distant, almost ironic. Anna felt a tight pain in her chest. It wasn't just a phone. It was the last thread connecting her to someone who could change everything. Her fingers moved slowly across the shattered screen. The glass lightly cut the tip of her finger, but she barely felt it. The deeper pain was elsewhere. Her world felt exactly like that in that moment. Cracked. Still functioning but wounded. Every broken line reflected everything that had happened inside the bank. The humiliation. The waiting. The expulsion. All of it condensed into that small, damaged object. Anna tried to unlock the device again. The screen responded, but with difficulty. Some areas no longer reacted to her touch. She took a deep breath, feeling frustration rise. If the phone stopped working completely, she wouldn't be able to tell her uncle where she was. The thought of being completely alone made her heart race. The bank was right behind her, yet it felt like an unreachable world. She looked around. People hurried past, stepping around the girl crouched on the sidewalk without noticing her. No one stopped. No one asked if she was okay. Anna carefully slipped the phone back into her pocket, even knowing that something had been lost. That fall hadn't been only physical. It had been symbolic. A silent warning that the day wasn't finished hurting her yet. She stood up slowly, her legs feeling weak. The cold wind hit her face, drying the moisture that threatened to turn into tears. Anna closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. She needed to stay strong. Her grandmother always said that when everything seems to break at once, it's because something is about to change form. Anna clung to that idea like someone holding onto a plank in the middle of the sea. She sat down on a stone bench near the entrance, keeping the bank within sight but without the strength to walk farther away. The broken phone weighed in her pocket like a constant reminder of the fragility of that moment. Anna felt loneliness creeping in slowly, filling every empty space. Even so, she pressed the envelope against her chest, searching for some stability in the middle of the chaos. The shattered glass reflected fragments of the gray sky above her. Anna realized she was trembling slightly, not from cold, but from emotional exhaustion. Everything had happened too fast. And yet, it felt like that day would never end. The phone in her pocket was proof that something had broken for good. But it was also a sign that after the fall, nothing could remain exactly the same. She didn't know how long she would sit there. She didn't know if her uncle would arrive in time. She only knew that the sound of breaking glass was still echoing inside her. And while she tried to pull herself together, Anna had no idea that just a few meters away, something was about to appear on the horizon. Something that would make that moment feel like nothing more than the silence before a twist impossible to ignore. Anna remained seated on the stone bench, feeling the cold seep through the thin fabric of her clothes and reach her skin. The spot was hard, uncomfortable, but she didn't move. Her body felt too tired to look for anything better. In front of her, the bank building remained imposing and indifferent, as if nothing had happened. People went in and out through the glass doors without noticing the girl outside. Anna was there, visible and invisible at the same time. She pulled her grandmother's letter out once more and held it with both hands carefully folded. She didn't read it. She just pressed the paper to her chest as if it were a silent prayer. The words were already engraved inside her. They didn't need to be revisited. The simple contact brought a fragile but real sense of protection. It was all she had at that moment. And, strangely, it felt enough to keep her from falling apart. The crying came softly, contained, almost without sound. There were no sobs. Just tears slowly rolling down, falling onto the cold concrete at her feet. Anna didn't wipe her face right away. She let the pain come out the only way it could. There was no audience now. No judgment. Just her, the cold, and the weight of the day piled inside a chest too small for all of it. Time seemed suspended. Cars passed on the nearby street, people talked in the distance, but none of it truly reached her. Anna felt as if she were in a separate space, an interval between what had happened and what was still to come. The stone bench became an improvised shelter, a silent altar, a place where she could exist without having to explain herself. She thought of her grandmother, of the calm way she faced difficulties, of how she used to say that some battles aren't won with noise, but with endurance. Anna felt a strange mix of sadness and strength. The pain was there, alive, pulsing. But it hadn't broken her. Not yet. And that, by itself, was a small victory on such a hard day. The broken phone weighed in her pocket, reminding her that her connection to the world was fragile. Anna wondered if her uncle would really arrive. She wondered if she had misunderstood everything. She wondered if that stone bench would be just another place of waiting without answers. The feeling of abandonment tried to take hold, but met resistance in the letter pressed against her chest. She slowly lifted her gaze and watched the movement around her, as if searching for some sign. Anything that might indicate she wasn't completely alone. The sky remained gray. The bench remained cold. But something inside her stayed firm, quiet, like a small flame that refuses to go out even in strong wind. Anna took a deep breath, wiped her face with the sleeve of her jacket, and straightened her posture. Not because everything was fine but because she knew she had to keep going. That moment of silence wasn't the end. It was a pause. A breath before something bigger happened. And without knowing it, while she remained there, invisible to almost everyone, someone was finally approaching. Someone whose arrival would completely change the course of that story. The sound of the engine arrived before the image. A low, steady growl, different from the ordinary cars passing along the street. Anna slowly lifted her head without expectation, almost by reflex. That was when she saw the black car parked just a few meters from the bank. A large Mercedes, discreet yet impossible to ignore. The doors opened calmly without haste, as if time itself obeyed whoever was inside. Roberto Silva stepped out of the car and quickly scanned the area, searching for someone specific amid the movement. His face carried restrained urgency. When his eyes found Anna sitting on the stone bench, something shifted. He crossed the street in long strides, forgetting any formality. Anna stood up when she saw him, feeling a knot loosen inside her chest. She didn't run. She simply stood there waiting. Roberto crouched down in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level. He didn't ask anything at first. He just looked at her face, at her swollen eyes, at the broken phone, at the crumpled envelope. That silent reading said more than any rushed explanation could. Anna tried to speak, but her voice failed. Then he placed his hand on her shoulder, firm, present. "I'm here now," he said softly, like a promise. She began to tell the story, slowly, still confused. She spoke of the laughter, the accusation, the waiting, the expulsion. Roberto listened without interrupting, his jaw tight, his eyes darkening with each sentence. When Anna finished, he took a deep breath, holding back something that wasn't pure anger but control. He looked again at the bank building and stood up calmly. The calm of someone making a serious decision. He took Anna's hand firmly, not to pull her along, but to make sure she would not be alone again. The gesture was simple, yet carried authority. People around them began to notice. Not because of noise but because of presence. Roberto adjusted his jacket, took a deep breath, and walked toward the bank's door with the girl at his side. His stride was confident, decisive, impossible to ignore. As they entered the lobby, the atmosphere shifted almost immediately. Conversations softened. Eyes turned. Something in Roberto's posture didn't match a recent expulsion or an improvised return. He didn't look like someone asking for explanations. He looked like someone coming to demand them. Anna felt it as she crossed the door again, now with his firm hand holding hers. The fear faded, replaced by a strange sense of protection. Lucian was the first to sense that something was wrong. He recognized the kind of presence that doesn't appear by chance. He instinctively straightened his posture. Francisco, upon seeing the two walk in, frowned. Something about that scene didn't fit the ending he had decided on minutes earlier. Anna's return didn't look like a mistake. It looked like a prelude. Roberto stopped in the center of the lobby and looked directly toward the counter, without raising his voice, without hurry. Silence spread once more, but this time it was different. It wasn't the silence of humiliation. It was the silence of expectation. Anna felt her heart beat fast, but not with fear. With anticipation. She didn't know exactly who her uncle was in that world. She only knew that, for the first time that day, someone had walked in willing to change the rules. And while Roberto still hadn't said a word, while he simply observed the environment that had hurt his niece, it became clear that the story was about to be turned upside down. Because he hadn't come back to ask for respect. He had come back to demand consequences. And the entire bank was about to discover who they were really dealing with. Roberto didn't start with shouting or accusations. He asked to speak with the manager, using a tone that was far too calm for the situation. Francisco approached with the same professional smile he used with important clients, trying to regain control. He asked how he could help. Roberto simply stated his full name clearly and requested that the regional director be called immediately. The certainty in his voice made the entire room hold its breath. Francisco hesitated. The smile faltered for a second. He tried to deflect, saying he could resolve everything right there. Roberto didn't accept it. He repeated the request, now looking directly into the manager's eyes. There was no explicit threat, but there was certainty. Lucian watched closely. Something was clearly outside the usual script. The bank, which minutes earlier had seemed absolute, now looked fragile. While they waited, Roberto requested access to the account mentioned in the documents. Francisco tried to argue, but Roberto's presence left no room for maneuvering. When the system opened, silence turned into shock. The numbers on the screen didn't make sense at first glance. A sequence far too long. Values that didn't match the image they had created of the girl. The balance was in the billions, the result of long-term investments, family funds, and an inheritance carefully structured by Elizabeth, the grandmother. The regional director arrived shortly afterward, hurried and confused, trying to understand what was happening. Roberto explained everything with precision. He presented documents, records, authorizations. Every detail dismantled the version Francisco had built. Ana remained silent beside him, watching the castle collapse without having to push anything. The truth did the work on its own. Francisco tried to justify himself. He spoke of protocols, of excessive caution. The director didn't respond immediately. She asked him to hand over his badge and wait. The color drained from the manager's face. Employees who had remained silent now avoided his gaze. The complicit audience began to disperse. The bank no longer supported the one who had crossed the line. Lucian was called to report what he had seen. For the first time he spoke. His voice came out firm despite the fear. Every word confirmed the abuse. Other employees, under pressure, also spoke. What had been an isolated incident became an exposed pattern. The director wrote everything down, her expression growing more serious by the moment. The consequences stopped being personal and became institutional. Roberto announced that he would take the case further. Not only for his niece, but for everything that had been revealed there. The bank would be investigated. Training programs would be redone. People would be held accountable. And as part of Elizabeth's legacy, an educational scholarship would be created. The Rosa Silva Scholarship, aimed at black children in vulnerable situations, so that no other child would have to go through what Ana had gone through that day. Francisco was escorted out, now under very different gazes. There was no applause. Only heavy silence. Ana watched everything with her heart racing. She didn't feel revenge. She felt delayed justice. The bank that had expelled her now bowed to the truth it had ignored. And in that moment, she understood that dignity does not depend on permission. Roberto knelt down in front of her again and asked if she was okay. Ana nodded slowly. The day had left its marks, but it had also created something new. A legacy. Real change. As they left the bank together, it was clear that this story didn't end there. It began there. Because when the truth finally walks through the door, there is no system that can pretend it didn't see it. How many Anas are still silenced every day before they even get a chance to speak? How many doors are closed not because of a lack of rights, but because of prejudice disguised as procedure? This story is not an exception. It is a reflection. An uncomfortable mirror of choices made in silence and of the courage that emerges when someone decides not to accept it. If you had been in that bank, would you have laughed, stayed silent, or acted? What does this story change in the way you see authority, appearance, and justice? Leave your reflection in the comments because it matters. And if you believe stories like this need to be told so they don't repeat themselves, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The next story may be even closer to reality than you imagine.